Mamba has a particular set of rules when dealing with images of different resolutions. As you'll remember, when we start a Mamba project, we start by going into the configuration program and specifying an output resolution. So what we're specifying there is the maximum resolution that we're going to deliver at. And technically what that does is it optimizes Mamba's processing to work for that resolution. But it's largely only a decision that relates to outputting. It doesn't affect the resolutions that we can bring into Mamba. So in this case, I've got a clip from Red Epic, and I've used the R3D params option to set the debayering to 1:1, which means I've got an image that's 5K by 2.7K, and my current Mamba settings are to output at 1920 by 1080. So that's why Mamba has put this up on the screen. It's warning me that just for this view, it's rescaled this 5K image. But in fact, if I were to immediately render this, because Mamba's output is set to 1920 by 1080, it would actually do a 1920 by 1080 cutout of this. So we should see this as a warning that we need to do something about this before we get as far as outputting. Mamba allows workflows within the nodes at any of the resolutions that the input clips provide. That's subject to a couple of effects only working at the output resolution. We'll look at those in a minute. To convert between resolutions, we can use the framing tool. And if I double click on it, we can see it's saying that the source resolution is the 5K resolution. And if I were to set it to do some rescaling, then it would set it to my output resolution. Actually, as it's set at the moment in its default, it's saying result size as input. So basically the output of this still is 5K. So even if I were to do some rescaling, this image is still a 5K image at this point. What I could do is select one of these two options to do a conversion between the 5K image and my 1920 1080 image, in which case I could either choose Project Anamorphic Scale, in which case simply this resolution has been squeezed into that resolution in order to ensure the full frame has gone in, or alternatively I could use Project 1:1 pixels. So that now means that the image coming out of here is just a 1920 by 1080 center cutout. We can also choose to fit X or fit Y, because we can see that actually this red material isn't a 16:9 aspect ratio. Most effects within Mamba can happily work at any resolution, but there's a particular set that can't. And just to demonstrate that, I'm going to change this to being 1:1 pixels. And I'm just going to manually scale that down. So this pipe here is going at 5K, the output of here. So if I insert something like a color corrector, we can see that the whole image is being color corrected, which basically means this color corrector is happily working at 5K before being downscaled in the framing tool to make it 1920 by 1080 coming out of here. But if I rather change that color corrector for, say, a denoise, you can see that actually now I've only got a center cutout. The reason is that denoise is part of the optical flow family, which is basically time warp, denoise, optical motion blur, frame repair, etc. And those work only at the resolutions that the system is set at. So in this case 1920 by 1080. So if we wanted this denoise to work, in most circumstances we could simply put it after the framing tool, so then it's working at the system resolution. Alternatively, we could change our system resolution to match this incoming footage, in which case then the denoise would be fine. There are some considerations as to where to put effects. For example, if I put a blur in here, then of course it blurs the whole image, and that blur is working at 5K. Alternatively, if I just cut that out and reapply it up here, the same blur is now working at 1920 by 1080. Visually, it's not going to make any difference, but processing-wise, it'll take longer to process here than it will here, because it has substantially more pixels to think about. Personally, the way I consider working with multiple resolutions is in most cases, I would bring my incoming resolutions to my mastering resolution as soon as possible, so that as I process later on, I know that all shots have the same resolution and that I'm processing at optimum speed. There are some scenarios though where you might want your processes to be acting on the higher resolution image. For example, if you're chroma keying you might find a benefit with a higher resolution. So it's good to get your head around the idea that incoming footage can be mostly processed at its own resolution. But unless there's a particular reason for doing that, all you'll be doing is slowing yourself down. Framing isn't the only tool that can do a conversion between resolutions. Actually, the Comp 3D can as well, in which case, under Options, we can choose what the result size is. At the moment, it's taking the resolution from input 1, and so we can see that the display is again warning us that we're back at 5K coming out of here. Alternatively, we could switch this to be the project resolution. So now, although 5K is going into layer 1, the output of the Comp 3D has been set to the project resolution. If for any reason we wanted to force a pipeline to adopt a different resolution, perhaps we're building up a high resolution image into which we're later going to zoom in or fly over, then this actually opens up a nice little trick, which is if you give Comp 3D an input of a given resolution, then its output is forced to be that resolution. So we could give it, say, a simple Targa image, and that would then force the output resolution to match the resolution of that Targa. When we come to output from Mamba, if this is not set, then the output resolution of the movies or images we create will be the system resolution, in my case 1920 by 1080. I can also put settings in here to change that to create output files of a different resolution. But it would be bad practice to put a higher resolution in here, because effectively then what would happen is Mamba would process at the system resolution and then do an up-res. So really this is only designed for making lower resolution outputs, for example previews for clients or what have you.